what have you done for me lately? It's Coons, what have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Welcome, everyone. Tonight we'll be having a very interesting discussion, but a discussion that is definitely needed, definitely during these times. It's a discussion that a lot of people see in their personal relationships, work relationships, in their relationships with society as a whole. The topic of our discussion today, Professor Drea, will be emotional maturity. Emotional maturity. What's up, Professor Drea?
What's up, Q? What's up, everyone? Good to be back again.
So tell me, we decided to have this talk about this topic, really take a dive into understand that these are, I try not to really focus and say these are trying times because in reality, these times are no different from other times throughout
Mhm.
history. And sometimes we will magnify these times. Well, these times is more important than other times. And we're living in trying times. And we have this doomsday rapture, which was just trending, approach to life, everyday life, what you and I, everyone else needs to do for life, do in life. And even if you have, for someone that may not have any type of spirituality
Mhm.
and who they're just they don't believe in what we believe in afterlife, they still can get this doomsday dread type of feeling from all types of factors. So when we discuss emotional maturity, what would you say with your experience, and you can tell the people in the chat your personal experience and your background and why this topic you probably would feel good because you know a lot about it, not from experience, but this is trained, this is teach. This is what you call to have great emotional health and
Right.
to have good mental health. What would you say emotional maturity is?
So I would say emotional maturity is when you have a resiliency or the bounce back from traumatic events, or it can even be trivial events, right? In which people can turn it into something traumatic, something that triggers you, and you have to often really have that self control and discipline to say to self, do I react to this or do I take a pause to shift my, thinking to see if it's really a response, right? And a lot of people, as we see, of course, on the internet and also too offline, people do not have that emotional maturity due to the big things I just said, the trauma, um, you know, the stunt in behavioral growth and also emotional growth. And that's called arrested development. And we can get into that. And so for me, just a little bit of my background for those that don't know, not only am I a professor, but I spent 20 years as a social worker. So um, I majored in social work, had my bachelor's and master's in social work, have my minors in sociology and psychology. And so a lot of times when you are taking the basic psychology classes, you talk about the developmental stages, right? Of, um, from birth all the way up to, the maturation of you becoming an elder or, a senior citizen. And a lot of times you don't hear about this word arrested development. We see a lot of people in arrested development, and I'll give y'all the definition. So arrested
Group.
development, okay.
I said you talk about the group.
Right, exactly.
The reality of it, and I say that jokingly, is that term which that group named it after. When you listen to what they were saying, they
Right,
were about giving us through music, giving us some glimpse of having some type of arrested development. And
exactly.
at that time, it may have went over a lot of people's heads, but as you mature and you get older yourself, and then you see factors, you see yourself, you might be like, damn, am I acting age appropriate behavior? Or do my peers have age appropriate behavior? What happened? Me,
Right.
me and my brother, or me and my sister, we grew up in the same house, both two-parent homes. The same factors. And a lot of what's trending now is those factors. We're talking about development. When you talk about
Mhm.
development, the emotional aspect, I see some people physically don't develop properly. So that's interesting that you even brought up arrested development, and being able to, as the person, sometimes you have to identify some things. A lot of people will look at outside to try to look
Mhm.
instead of looking inside and then having a view of themselves and how they fit in this grand scheme of things. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. So the definition you was right on point with the definition Q is arrested development is when a person's emotional, psychological, or behavioral growth is stuck or frozen at a certain stage, usually due to the big T, trauma, neglect, or unresolved issues from childhood or adolescence. And to wrap the whole thing up is pretty much an interruption or a delay of normal emotional or psychological growth. And I like what you say about, you can have siblings, y'all grew up in the same household, but you also got to take account of too is we experience our parents differently. For me to give you all like a brief how I grew up in Boston with seven parents. I am the youngest. So between my brother and my middle brother and myself, we're 12 years apart. So, and my eldest brother is 14 years apart. So they can kind of be my parents. And I'm growing up in a different generation. My parents also too, they went through this whole transition within self, and me being a also the only girl, so I experienced my parents differently. My brothers experienced my parents differently than I did. So, and they kind of grew up with my parents as well, because my parents kind of had them at a younger stage. So, sometimes even growing up with the same parents, we may feel like, well, our parents treated us differently. That may could be a trauma for someone, and that could be an unresolved issue, right? I know I always get, well, Andrea, you spoiled and you got more than we did, but at the same time, my parents was at a different stage financially, emotionally mature when they had me. So they had my brother at like 18 and 20 versus 30, mid 30s. So of course, hopefully the stages of their life they develop differently, and also too they have grown from their mistakes and also their unresolved issues. And what we see now is we see a lot of arrested development in our peer group, unfortunately, because of maybe the trauma that they refuse to address. A lot of people do not want to do the inner work because we can all have some type of trauma that happened in our lives. It's all about how do you face it, how do you deal with it, and also too, are you going to be courageous enough to say, "Hey, I'm stuck at this um, immature age, but chronologically you could be in your 40s and 50s, but I'm stuck at 16 due to not acknowledging these things have happened to me and not be learned helplessness. See, in social work we say learned helplessness is you learn how to be helpless. Oh, you're always a victim. If I had friends that was always a victim. They call you, it's the same story. So I'm the type of person like, so what are you going to do about it? You're not going to constantly dump on me and I'm going to experience secondary trauma and I'm having an amazing day, and here you come dumping on me. And then I'm going to get stuck in my, let's say, emotional intelligence or development. That's when the accountability piece, the responsibility piece have to be pushed back onto our friends and family. But a lot of people don't want to hear that because they're in arrested development. So you're pretty much technically talking to a teenager, even though chronologically they may be aged in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And that's another thing. Like, when you start to assess and you start to look at it, well, like we was discussing prior to coming on the show, and I was telling you how when you're dealing with a lot of people, mixing it up, and you're in an environment where you're dealing with possibly 50, 60, let's just say high number, 50, 60 different personalities, and you don't realize it, but you're hearing all these conversations with these people, big work environment, and they're dumping their emotional baggage, and they're dumping their whatever they got going on trauma to you, and you may not even realize it at the time. You might be oblivious, and it's like, hold up, why I don't have this amount of energy? Like, what's going on? Why am I allowing myself to fall into having a bad attitude at home, a bad attitude at work when it's not me? We always tend to say, well, life is good. Well, if life is good, why you're not happy? Why you're not joyful if life
Right.
is good? One of the issues I know when we speak about trauma is in media, and I'm gonna just say this for the sake of the show and having this conversation, and people, we are on social media. This is a social media platform to have this conversation. And what attracts a lot of us is drama and trauma, even if it doesn't be us or it has anything to do with our life. We're attracted to drama, trauma, and what's going on. We like the tea, so to say. And the tea is to see some people going through what they say. And even in media, what they say about TV, if it bleeds, it leads. And it's like, okay, well, you want all this extra drama, trauma as an outlet from you to get away from your social norms, you to get away from having to deal with what you got going on in life. But this is what you're attracted to. And you may not realize it. It does have an effect on you. I know at one point, even when me and you had met, I was in the midst of it and I still haven't watched it. I have not watched the whole news. I watched a segment, but I have not watched the whole news broadcast since Mike Brown's murder.
Mhm.
I just don't watch it. And the reason why is because I've seen some things on different channels where they had been reporting it. You would think that they report news and they're really reporting opinion.
Right.
That's my personal thing. So understanding that trauma, let me ask you, when you were doing your teaching, you was doing giving people advice. Basically, I know it's hard sometimes because you didn't want to be the one to be someone's counselor, so to say.
Mhm.
You can always refer to someone that probably fits that skill set.
Right.
How is it when you listen to somebody and you're trying to give them a gauge like, yo, you're not dealing with your trauma, you're dealing with everyone else's trauma. You're just allowing yourself to be a dumping. You're taking the trauma on its own. Give us some stuff with that, and continue conversating on the factors.
Definitely. So when I was in practice as a social worker, that kind of led me to out the profession and into the higher education realm because a person can only take so much dumping. Like if someone was to come and see me for clinical work, and we going through a session of therapy, um, of course, you want to be the safe space, no doubt. You want to be the safe space, but also too, you want to make sure that you're actively listening. You're asking the reflective questions like, well, why do you feel drama is always following you? Because I heard that so many times. Drama always follow me, but why? What are you opening the door to for the drama to come in? Because a lot of times, as you mentioned, on the low or even out loud, we like to entertain the drama because maybe our lives are so boring that we're like, "Well, I'm going to welcome the drama." So here comes the people. You're friending any and everybody. You're not using discernment. You're not using your emotional intelligence to say, you know what, every time this person, call me up. I'm the sounding board. And then after a while, you're internalizing that secondary trauma. That's the secondary trauma for you. And then you become compassion fatigue. You're like, I'm so burnt out to the point now I gotta go see a therapist because what do I do with this other person's drama that dumped on me? I'm gonna have to go to a therapist because they refuse to go to a therapist, right? To find coping mechanisms. Now I gotta go see a person like Andrea to unload. And then I'm looking at the person like, well, why are you even opening up the door to be an active sounding board when you should have boundaries? And I think so many times people want to have, they want to save face. Oh, I want to be friends to everybody. First of all, you're not going to be friends with everybody. I remember even just getting my master's degree, and I had a friend, even to this day in 2025, I got my master's degree in 2009, have the same type of drama trauma. And I saw her like 2 weeks ago and still have this. I was like, this is why we're not friends because I can't take on your burdens and you refuse to go do your work. Like me, as I've been in the field for 20 years as a social worker. I have been to therapy numerous of times, and it doesn't make me crazy because I feel like therapy is essential to help you get out of that arrested development so you can go into I call it the thriving development, so you can be holistically sound, so you can be healthy for yourself and happy and also be at peace. And a lot of people do not have peace in their life. Yes, we live in a world that is filled with turmoil, but you can have some sense of peace in your life. Like my house is peaceful, it's my safe haven. People that I surround myself with that I love, that I can lay my burdens down, but I don't lay them down so much that I'm dumping on them all the time. Or if they see my number, they're like, I'm not pick up the phone. That's why I invest in myself and my mental health and my emotional health and go to a therapist. I journal. I have a prayer closet. I read the Bible. I work out. I do a lot of dumping when it comes to prayer and to working out because that helps me to keep me in check as well. Instead of laying down my burdens to my parents or my family or my friends because they have their own life issues going on. So saying no is not being a bad guy, especially when you got your own things going on. You can be there for people and be a safe space, but also to being a really dope friend, a dope family member is like, hey, you got a job, go use your EAP, your employee assistance program, or go to a therapist. And we don't do that enough, and hence why we get entertained. It turns into now the dumping on social media, and they turn social media into their actual journal. And then now they're like, well, why am I getting weaponized? Or why this status is about me? And it doesn't have to be about them, but because you choose not to go within to say, how am I the problem? Because we all are a problem from time to time in our lives and in the lives of other people. And when you cannot take accountability, responsibility, that's the problem.
And one of the things also is like having so much grace for others that you never forget to have grace on yourself and understanding like, and it was a phrase that someone said, and I can't remember it to give them the credit, but it was, I didn't come this far to come this far, and understanding like, being so attached to so many things that gonna trigger an emotional response, an emotional reaction, and then realizing like, you know what? Why am I even giving these quote unquote triggers all this energy? I had found myself, and I have no problem talking about this, even with doing some content when the Charlie Kirk situation had happened, right? I was so indifferent
Hmm.
when it that I had people asking me like, how you feel about it, what's your thoughts, where I really couldn't even give nothing far as content. Now I've talked about it, gave my opinion about it, but I'm just indifferent. Sometimes situations happen where you can be indifferent, and then even in being indifferent, I would be on the phone, and I'd be on the phone with people, and we'd be conversating, and they'd be like, "Oh, you there?" Because I wouldn't say nothing, and I'm like, "Yeah."
Mhm.
And they'd be like, "Oh, you preoccupied?" I'm like, "No, I'm not preoccupied. It's just that sometimes, and as you get older, you
Mhm.
start so this stuff don't trigger me like it used to trigger me.
Right.
Too much more important stuff going on in my life.
Right.
I need to focus on what I'm doing that I can't allow that to even weigh me because sometimes this stuff does take a life of its own. You start looking at and I use that situation because we are people who were created no matter what spiritual background a person has, no matter what ideology they believe, we're here
Mhm.
to socialize with other human beings. We're here to incohabitate with people that we're because nobody's the same.
Right.
So you're gonna be around people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, who don't act like you, whether you realize it or not. But then you may look at social media or TV and you have this world view of thinking because it is part of an indoctrination
Mhm.
where you start thinking everybody's the enemy
Yep.
or you start thinking of worst case, like I said in the opening, doomsday scenarios in your head. And now I don't want to poo poo on anybody that has been diagnosed. You're really acting schizophrenic.
Mhm.
You're acting very paranoid, and you have this, your emotional
Right.
state is always on trigger. And then you'll even see it. Some people get on social media and be like, I was watching this and this triggered me. You be like,
Mhm.
and so I say that, one of the things for me, the reason I had started talking about it was when you get to a certain point in life, and everybody has their time. That's key with a conversation because we don't know when a person is going to get it
Right.
to be mature enough to handle certain situations. And sometimes we're very judgmental and be like, "Well, you such and such this age, you should know."
Mhm.
They could have been in the midst of all the trauma that they had going on, but
Right.
oh, you 30, you should know. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You doing it. But they might have been going through so much trauma for so long.
Mhm.
One of the things, like I said, being indifferent towards situations. Ain't
Mhm.
got
Right.
some some people could talk about stuff, don't got nothing to do with them, be emotional, caught up in it, pop, 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 talking, and then go back into a whole nother mood. Like when I'm indifferent, I have nothing to give. Like
Exactly.
why do you think that? And we talk about the age difference, and you said we both grew up in homes where we weren't the only child, and sometimes you, sister, like, for your case, brother, does he think like this? Like where he came from? You, my mom must have dropped you as a baby, like because you something ain't something ain't right, and then you like why your view is this, and professionals that study this stuff have never been able to figure it out because they even try to say, well, maybe it's your environment, which is
Mhm.
something
Right.
education, relationships, small relationships, young relationships. So what would you think would be some of? I know we can easily look it up and look it up. What would you see in your experience with some of these crazy factors and scenarios which shape that maturity maturation process?
You said a major one is the person in the environment. That's the keystone to anything because think about the environment that you was raised in and even the people you surround yourself with. As the great Booker T. Washington said, it's better to be alone than to be in bad company. which is very true because even the Bible says bad association spoils useful habits, which is very true. Think about people that you surround yourself with on a regular basis and think about how you may act. Are you the fifth dummy because you know the rest of them may not read? They may read. Not saying that you're dumb because you watch reality TV show. I used to watch reality TV show, but sometimes you know, we behave based off of the environment that we keep and the company that we keep as well. And then, you know, even though our parents may give us some amazing beliefs and values, a lot of times, you know, if you're independent thinking, you critically think, you're like, you know, does this pertain to how I want my life to go, you know, moving forward? And a lot of our outside influences, such as our friends, do influence us. I don't care what anybody says. You know, I don't care at what age. And a lot of times too, people don't self-reflect and say, "Am I a follower? Am I a leader?" And I know when I was teaching undergrad, I used to always ask my students that, like, "Are you a follower? Are you a leader?" Like, really think about that because if everybody is willing to do all these things over here, are you going to be peer pressured to do that over there, or to have your critical thinking, a mind of your own, to do your own solo thing? So I think a lot of times people don't realize that our environment can definitely shape us. And, you know, we end up gravitating towards those same people, especially if we don't do the work on ourselves to say, yo, I'm hanging with the same people, they're not going anywhere. Or do you want to hang with people who not only just give you ideas, but you're executing the ideas? And you have a purpose in your life, you have a calling on your life to do those things. You want to surround yourself with people who are going places instead of just like, oh, I don't want to stand out. But so many people want to fit in too, because like you mentioned, you know, we've been socialized to be connected to people, but more than ever, we're disconnected because we got this device called social media. And it seems like, you know, so many people that you'll be surprised will gravitate towards, you know, people that you like. You like them, you like their music. I remember back in the day, you like this person, but people always want to fit in. But sometimes it's okay to, you know, not fit in, do your own thing, be a leader. Um, but a lot of times people think that's is boring. And you know, it's like I want to follow the leader and whoever the flavor of the week.
One
Um,
of the
Go ahead.
one of one of the things I find myself doing sometimes, right, is this is a shot to all you iPhone users. I'm quite sure iPhone does it, but with Android, you know, each week, you know, your phone does the diagnostic, and it'll tell you how many time you spent on your phone, what apps. It will itemize what you did with your time through the week. And I know a lot of people may just overlook it as soon as it pop up, just swipe, don't pay no mind. But I literally was paying attention to it probably about 6 months ago. Started really looking at it. It's like you were on your phone 3 more hours this week than last week. And I would look into it and then realize I was on certain apps longer on Facebook, IG, you know, X, TikTok. And you'd be like, yo, I spent that much time. And then you might look at what you should use your phone for. Calls. You'd be like, yo, I don't call them. You'd be like, yo, I called? Then you go through your week, how many people you called and be like, yo, I called the same 8 people. 3 of them was coworkers. 2 of them might have been a supervisor, your mate, yeah, or this person. And then you'd be like, damn, I didn't reach out to none of my extended family, none of my extended friends. I didn't shoot them a text, just check on them. And, you know, having that, you know, that grace for them and
Hmm.
yourself and realizing, I know one of the things, and you brought it up years ago, and you talked about it when we had the food desert conversation. I know one of the things that you had did in your personal life that I know you love to share is you started your garden
Hmm.
and how you taking that time out to really go outside and start your garden. And that was like your personal relationship, like got away from everything, didn't have your phone, nothing, no attachment to social media, but an attachment to earth, so to say. How did that experience with remembering how to garden because your people from the South originally
Mhm.
and getting back into that, how did that change or help with your maturation?
Mm. That's a good question. So I always been not the street term outside, but I always been the one outside. I was the tomboy growing up. Like I said, I have brothers. I played ball, ran track, played volleyball, and I love sports. So going down south, like you mentioned, every time we would leave from Alabama to come back home to Boston, we would stop by my great uncle's house, my great uncle Worley, and he always had this amazing garden. He had greens, he had turnip greens, he had beans. So we would stop by there to get like stuff from his garden to bring back with us and also to share with my great aunt and my cousins in Boston. And just the connection to the earth and to the land because that was part of, my great grandparents' land that we was gardening from. So that was just a connection to, like my family and just having a conversation. Even though my great uncle would tell this same story about my mom 50, 11 times, it was still refreshing to hear a man that much older. He was like in his 70s, 80s at the time. And I said, man, this is so dope. And how at peace he felt. Like he was at peace and, oh, I'm connected to my people. I'm so happy to see y'all. So that what got me back into gardening and also to, reading the wonderful inventions George Washington Carver had invented. And what really got me back into gardening was reading about how George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington actually had like community gardens and they would actually, help people to learn how to garden and eat from the land and which I really love. I always like the concept of like farm to fork. Like one day in my life, hopefully I'll get to that point. I can live on the farm and grow food in which it'll go straight to the fork. But that also calmed me down. I always been a calm person, but just when COVID and everything else was going on, I said I need to find more solace in my life because I had a lot of stuff going on personally in which I needed to connect back to nature because, like I said, I've always been like this girl that's always been outside, and the devices was just draining my energy. And so when I started back gardening and knowing that I can grow food, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And especially, touching the soil, that is a actually healing factor when you're touching the soil. When you hear people say, go outside and touch grass, go outside and touch grass, touch soil because it is a healing factor for us and we need to connect back to earth. Like we need to connect back to that. We're so disconnected from earth, from nature. Sometimes I just sit here on my deck and just look at the birds and be like, oh, okay, this bird is indigenous to this. So, like I said, I'm an outside person based off of that. Also, too, I'm a art person. I'm a museum person, and just learn about how just the earth came about. Of course, we know about the Most High, but just even how indigenous people, how they survive and why certain places in the United States is based off of this water because of the agriculture. So, for me. It's all about being an alchemist and how do you turn nothing into something. Also, help me connect to being emotionally mature, and it also helps me to think because people are not thinkers anymore. People are reactors. And that's why people have to be very careful because, we want to react all the time. And I could imagine you might have high blood pressure, cholesterol, because you don't sit down and really think and be like, is this person capable of, what I'm going to say to them? Are they going to receive it? Because to be honest with you, it's a lot of people who are undiagnosed mentally ill, and it's a lot of people who do not read because it was like what 54% of people who are illiterate not taking shots at people. So people, of course, they don't want to look stupid. So of course they're going to have that emotional reaction to you to attack because inside they're lacking something within. And so sometimes I think when we think about that, we need to take a step back. Like, is this person even capable of me even going back and forth with? Because if they cussing and fussing, doing all this stuff, they're not. They wanna. They're masking their insecurity by saying, "Well, I'm gonna get the last word." And sometimes you just gotta let people go ahead. And how old are you too? Like once again, you
Like
chronologically a certain age, but that means that's your maturity matched up to that age.
being able to identify if that person is capable enough to have a disagreeable conversation and may get some benefit out of it instead of throwing a defense mechanism up. It's funny when I brought up the garden to you. I knew you were going to really be excited about talking about your garden. Is you see what a lot of people do for projects to get away from stress. You see a lot of men at a certain point in time used to go fishing, hunting, used to do a lot of different activities that did not require them to know what was going on everywhere else in the weather. Because a lot of times people they didn't take a TV. Now you're walking around with the computer in your hand with via phone, know everything that's going on. Even so much so that most people actually, and they've done studies of it, most people actually take their phone with them when they use the bathroom
Mhm.
instead of saying, let me unplug for a minute. Let me really get into what I gotta get into. I know as a kid, I used to always wonder, I see the older gentlemen, they would be at the diner, at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm like, why are they always there? Why they ain't home? You would think that a person that has a career, has a family, they would always be home. But sometimes you need that camaraderie, that real,
Mhm.
that real social understanding. Like, I have to be around other beings.
Mhm.
Gotta, to have that emotional maturity. Because sometimes you have to look. Yes, we know that the mirror is the best teacher, but sometimes you have to look at other people and be like, I don't want to be that. I can't believe that person just said that dumb shit. Right?
Right.
Where'd they get that thing? And you start to realize like a lot of people, definitely nowadays, social media has a I don't agree with it, but a lot of doctors, a lot of studies and stuff are coming out how social media is having very bad effect on people's skills, people's understanding of life, what's going
Mhm.
on, detachment. I know that we're of the era where you see a lot of younger people locked in their room playing video games instead of saying, okay, they're playing games. Let me go in there and see if okay, can they make money playing games? See what's- But a lot of times they're so locked to the screen.
Mhm.
Screen time is not allowing, and it is allowing the arrest of the.
Mhm.
So if Angel says she drives
Oh,
too.
awesome. Good. Good evening. That's awesome. Yes, it is a sacred space. It really is. Because you like
So
locked into what you're doing.
so we're not gonna be here, and I know we just trying to just if anybody could get a benefit from the conversation, it's having emotional maturity. I really think that a lot of people. I just when you look at what's going on, it's in the beginning with society, doomsday theory, why everybody feel like it's dread. It's because I think society is not as emotional. Sure, it's just a lot of people haven't seen. I'm saying years ago, 60s or 70s, the mother would tell me when you saw that army dude pull up and go to someone's house to give them the death notice for Vietnam. That was a humbling experience, and it changed a lot of people. So I think that a lot of people have this unfortunate death. I know me and you and myself, we did a lot of conversations for COVID
Mhm.
where I had to really work on mental. And I think that the unfortunate some of the lessons that a lot of us should have learned from COVID went over our head,
Yes.
and now we got off the hook. So,
Yeah, because we're seeing the exacerbation of like the fallout of COVID, right? Like we didn't have any, I would say, like aftercare of holistic care of after COVID. So now you're seeing mental health on the rise, domestic violence, substance abuse, um, vaping, even down to I remember when I went to go get my eyes in a few months ago, my optometrist was like, younger people are ruining their eyes because of the screen. You don't see kids having recess. There, as far as with sunlight, a lot of people are iron deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, Because I go walking, I have a walker pad, but I go walking every day, and I'm all like, it don't be anybody outside. Oh, it's too hot. It's too this. It's too that. And I'm like, I remember you couldn't get me
Every time,
inside the house.
Rhea, every time I do a show, I go like this every time. I'll be like, well, I get a little sun.
Exactly. So it's just people
Yeah,
don't go
I, re-
outside.
I really get dark messing around with that sun. But yeah, so what would you give us in some solutions to really work on having some emotional maturity? Because it's like you said, and we hopefully some people got out of it. It's okay to be emotionally immature because a lot of stuff happens from you as a child, from
Mhm.
up until whenever, for
Right.
you to identify and work in. And some of it happens naturally, some of it you have to really put the work in. So, what would be some of the solutions that you would think or be able to give us to help someone?
So I would say number one, spend time with yourself. No device, no TV on. Spend time with yourself and do self evaluation every day. Are you where you want to be at in your life? And I'm not talking about, oh, I got the bag. Where are you at in your life? Are you happy? And I'm talking about happy with inner. Are you happy with your weight? Are you happy with your skin? Because you maybe need a different skin care routine. Do you have peace in your life? Can you look around your house and say, you know what, I'm happy where I'm at? And if the answer is no, or happy with your friend group, um, the answer is no, you need to start putting in the work. What does that look like? Self awareness is, I have a problem with ABC 1, 2, 3. And it's the toughest thing, but it's a freeing thing when you say I have an issue and this is a stumbling block or a barrier for me to get from point A to point B. A lot of people end up not meeting their goals because they don't want to sit down and admit I'm the problem. We all, like I said, we all can and have been the problem of our growth. Number two, if you feel that you can't get to that point of saying I'm the problem, you can seek a professional. But before you get there, I need you to go look in the mirror and take accountability and responsibility for where you at in your life. Especially if you at a big age, there's no more blaming your parents. Your parents did the best that they could for what they have. Now it's time for you to say, okay, the buck stops here and I gotta take accountability. Even when a friend is telling you something, they love you, but take accountability for your life. Also, too, it's okay to take that social media break. Social media is the dumping grounds of narcissism, antagonistic behavior.
Guys in the
Um,
For you guys in the chat, I never told you guys on this channel. Me and Drea met through Twitter. And after we met on Twitter, she was out quick.
yeah,
And
and I
it,
was
and it
building momentum on Twitter. I was like, I'm out of here.
a nice Twitter following. And next thing I know, we linked up. And she was like, nah, nah, nah. I'm out of this. I'm done with this stuff.
Yeah,
And what was that, like 6 years ago?
it was before COVID. It was
Wow.
before COVID. It was like, matter of fact, I think I was still living on the East Coast.
Wow.
It was about like 8 years because I've been in Alabama like 7, 8 years now. So yeah, it was back when I was on the East Coast. And I'm the queen. If you haven't told y'all, I'm the queen of, I will bounce on y'all on social media. Y'all won't see me for months because I'm protecting my peace, because I know I can get very like, yeah, because I'm a creative person and sometimes I need that break too. And I can get so caught up in the mix of like, what these people doing? Oh my God, no one's not listening to me. But I had to will it back and say, even one person is like, man, Andrea shared something with me, cool. So sometimes you need to take that social media break because it can be a cesspool of nonsense, and it's okay. I'm telling y'all, if you have to unfollow folks, block folks, I just blocked somebody I went to high school with. I was like, sir, you are out of control, because when it started, he was trying to critique me. First of all, I haven't seen you in like 25 years. That's how long it'll be. 24 years. I haven't seen you in 24 years since I graduated high school. You don't have the same accessibility as you did when we was in high school. So you're not gonna do that. And so sometimes you have to really. I'm a person. I will shut you down with a smile. I don't have to be nasty about it. I don't have to make an announcement. So do that. Have your boundaries too. Like go to bed. Go to bed by 10 o'clock. Get off them devices. Go to bed by 10 o'clock. That also will restore. Sometimes you need to also restore because we are a computer. We need to shut it down before we. Oh, I gotta get the last word, and that's what caused a lot of people to have arrested development because they gotta have the last word because once again they probably couldn't have a voice when they was growing up. Their parents probably was emotionally unavailable, and we also have to think too, y'all, just because you was raised the same a certain way doesn't mean that person was raised the same way you was. And also too, some people, I know it's the quote, sometimes we were not all raised with nurturing and love. Some people was probably abused, neglected. So once again, it's like you give that fine line of grace, but also too is sometimes you got to shut folks down, but that comes with emotional intelligence and maturity and know when to exit the conversation, exit a situation because some people, like I said, are not well. And so always remember that, like, some people are not well at all. And why go back and forth with them? Because you're going to be looking emotionally immature too.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and like I said, one of the things for me, one of the things that helped me a lot is environment change, and I never realized how an environment change would have an effect on me. I mean, you move to different towns, it's okay.
Mhm.
It helps a lot of people. But Drea, you move from your home state where you was birthed from the soil and you
Right.
move to a state and you just don't know people. The only
No.
people that know is the people, like in your case, school and work. In my
Mhm.
case, and you have to meet people, you have to socialize with people,
Right.
you see things the way through your lens, how you perceive. Like for me, from the street and being in an environment where you better keep your head on the swivel
Mhm.
to really see the bigger picture.
Right.
Environment I'm in now, I live in a very, very rural environment when it comes to where I live and then where I work. You go through the city and there's stores, but for the most part, everything is shut down at 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
Going going from a city that never sleeps, where you can go out and party and hang out all night into the morning,
Right.
break day, and then to be in an environment and you don't realize how it slows you down.
Absolutely. It does.
Your life different. Slows your
Right.
life.
Yeah, and then also too is you can change environments, right? But you take yourself into each environment. And are you pleased with yourself? Because you could take yourself and take let's say you was in the streets, you was outside for real, and you can go to a rural environment and still want to be outside. You have to change who you are. You have to rewire and you have to once again mature holistically so you're not finding yourself in a different environment as the same person around the same people with different names. That's how people too when it comes to toxic relationships where people are like, oh my God, I date the same person over and over because you didn't change who you are within. So you will stop attracting those people or aligning with those people. And then also to change your taste and change the kind of people who you change the kind of person you are so you can align with other people that's different from, in the past. So once again, people always want to put the blame on other people, but you have to once again look at yourself in the mirror and say, what do I need to unlearn, unpack, and also to not feel like, oh, that's lame or boring because I got rid of bad habits. It's okay to get rid of bad habits if you want to have longevity and be mature.
Yeah. One of the things that I used to, when I was a kid, we used to play on our front porch. And I never, once you grow out of that, don't think about that stuff. And then now I'll be in the back sometime, I'll be in the shed, I'll do something in the yard, every once in a while. But sometimes when the weather's really nice, I go on the front porch and just sit there. And, you know, I was telling my neighbor the other day, we was talking. and he grew up in New York, and I was telling him how growing up in a big city, around a big city, you don't realize how much air noise it is. And then when you come to an environment where, I'm 10 miles from the airport, but this airport has one terminal compared to Newark Airport has five. So then
Mhm.
you have JFK, which is another 8, 9 miles each direction, and you see all this air pollution, air traffic.
Right.
But then when you go in a different area, you don't hear sirens, and you be like, dang.
Mhm.
Sometimes I look up where I live at, and I was up north, about 40 minutes from my house, and I saw a helicopter. And I kept looking up. So my boy was looking up, and they were amazed because they don't see. They grew up in this area. And I'm telling him, like, I'm used to seeing
Right.
helicopters. I'm used to seeing, scare people, fighter jets and stuff like that. You Air Force. They had the Air Force bases that wasn't too far from that. And now to not deal with that noise, to have some type of outside real solitude, you start to realize your environment, your atmosphere, and your solitude has a big effect. I remember one time my grandfather grew up Georgia. He used to get mad, but he never got mad. He used to always laugh. I would do stuff. He just start shaking his head and he'll laugh. And he would always say to me, once you start getting older, you'll start slowing down. And he used to dance to his own beat. He had retired. He used to move at his own beat. My cousin would go there. She would be like, Pop, I need you to do something for me. He'd be like, okay. He'd take his time, do this, do that, and the third. And he was a hunting guy. He used to go hunting with his crew. And he just moved and he had a lot of peace around,
Mhm.
in spite of what may have been peace. Very, very interesting conversation decided to have, and being able to have that emotional maturity to be able to socialize with your coworkers, family, friends, and realizing it's not that serious. It's not that serious. So I know that everybody in the chat, I know Sister Star was very supportive of the channel, and I appreciate their support as always.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Drea, on emotional maturity?
Just like I said, just make sure that y'all work on yourselves. You are your biggest advocate, your longest investment, and why stay stuck at a immature age? It's not too late to mature neither. At any age, we can grow at any age. So don't get that mindset like I'm stuck in my ways. I hate when people say that. You can grow as long as you're above ground. You can grow and develop at any age. But are you willing to put in the work in? And it takes time.
Earth Angel said, "What's wrong with accepting someone for who they are? I'm a right versus wrong type of person. People make mistakes, but you can't continue the same, which becomes a choice. I don't believe in fence strong." Yeah, one of the things, Earth Angel. I don't know if you had listened. I don't know if you had already joined the broadcast. Is having that grace,
Mhm.
just on others, but on self.
Yes.
And what I mean when I really say that is understanding who you are, where
Mhm.
you, what would you do if hypothetically you was in the same situation that the person that you think that you're giving them grace, but in turn you're giving them self grace.
Right.
You know what type of person you are and how you'll be handling stuff, and then you got to say to yourself, "Let me be easy." Sometimes it's not always good to be so harsh and rough and tough on everybody in every
Mhm.
situation. Everything in life, you have to be the determining person how to balance it out. I can't tell you.
Right.
Well, we can only, as we say, share each other, share advice, share scenarios with each other.
Mhm.
But I know I have grace with certain people, with certain
Mhm.
situations. But then sometimes I'm like I don't understand people being late. I have a with people being late, guys. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm really scarred to tardiness.
Yes.
But it's hard for me to have grace with.
Mhm.
So I see that someone's late to work, late to an event or whatever. I try not to let that tardiness take a life of its own and start getting offended like they're doing it purposely.
Right.
I just
Absolutely.
okay, maybe something happened, scenario. I don't even look at it like, well, because I get offended. Because I'd be like,
Mhm.
well, why shoot the text and say this and say that? What I would do. But what I would do or what Dre would do is not what the next person would do.
Exactly. Right. And I like with that comment because I always say, and this is in social work, you have to meet people where they're at because you want someone to meet where you at as well. And also too, I remember my therapist said, she said either you're going to accept the situation or you're going to adapt to it. And that also was life changing for me because I do a lot of radical acceptance. And then I said, well, this is how this person is. One day, hopefully, they will change. And cool. If they don't, I can't fix them. I can't change them. They have to do that. And hopefully, the seed that I'm planting, and I hope someone plants a seed in me that it will grow. But we're not responsible for changing or fixing anyone. We can only do that for ourselves. And that's tough when we do it ourselves because, once again, to accept the fact, to acknowledge the fact that, hey, I have an issue. We all have some inner issues that what they said, we don't read that chapter out loud, right? But, what are you going to do once you acknowledge you have an issue? Are you going to grow from it or are you going to regress? Because a lot of people are regressing as well. And also to give yourself the grace and you want someone to meet you where you're at and meet people where they're at. But that doesn't mean you got to dumb yourself down or dim your light neither. So,
Oh, Earth Angel, that's a whole nother show right
oh yes, because I can write a whole
there.
thing
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
one of the things with learning and trying to have that emotional maturity. Don't beat yourself up because,
Mhm.
and I don't want to take because, like I said, that's a whole nother show. But don't allow a moment
Yes.
in your life to become who. When you think about it, and Andrea said, I met her years ago when she
Mhm.
was on Twitter. She probably wouldn't even know how to get on Twitter now. And that was a different phase of all our lives. I
Right.
was at the spot where I met her. She was at a different spot where I met
Mhm.
her. And if you take situations and scenarios of where you were at then and allow yourself to be emotionally caught up with it, whether it was good or bad,
Mhm.
it will hinder where you are now.
Absolutely.
You have to, and I know it's hard, you have to work on detachment from that which is good and that which is bad.
Mhm.
It's just a moment.
Absolutely. And just because
People,
you having a bad moment doesn't mean you having a bad life.
yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Earthlander. It is a part of learning you.
Mhm.
Yes. And that, I think that me and you, Earth Angel, I think that me and you might be around the same age or you might be a little older. I know, please. But that's one of the interesting things about what we call this thing is life, is that when you do start to learn, you do start to pull your layers back, you start to appreciate not the situation you're in, the journey
Yes.
and understanding like, I really went through all that to get to where I'm at now.
Mhm.
That whole process was educational and information.
Yes.
And I learned this about myself, this. And then you start to realize that some of the people that even think that they know you, grew up with you, worked with you, they don't know who you really are.
Exactly.
they knew who you represented.
Right.
So as
Absolutely.
we continue to grow, we continue to learn, we continue to be the better version of ourselves each day, and be able to have these conversations where, whether it's a quote unquote show where me and Drea are doing the talking, you guys in the chat, that we talking together, not talking at each other, talking with each other,
Mhm.
and as the people from New York used to say, we're building together.
Yep.
So with that, appreciate you guys. I'm glad we could have this conversation. And this is a break from the norm when we're talking about the tea. Because at the end of the day, the tea is going to be the tea.
Yep.
What's going on in the world is going to go on in the world, but you always want to have some type of balance and some type of conversation to break it up a little bit. And we will get back to that when it's appropriate and when it's permitting, because at the end of the day, y'all know it's always something good.
Mhm.
With that, appreciate you guys in the chat for checking us out. Dre, appreciate you always.
Thank you.
Until
Peace out.